Hey guys, thanks for watching. The best way to support the show is to go into the description as well as the pinned comment. There is a locals, there's a Patreon with daily behind the scenes videos. There's also a PayPal, a Cash App, and a Buy Me a Coffee. All good ways to support. Most of you guys support in the $3 to $5 a month, which is amazing. The big three revenue streams are YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify, and those can and will fluctuate wildly and sometimes outright cancel me. The show needs about $5,000 a month to run. Right now, it's making about $1,500 from fans alone. I want to get that up to 5,000 a month so that the big three can go pound sand and the show can remain independent. The show does take money. It's just what it is. If you can only donate $1 a month, that is awesome. So if you could, please think about it. Go in there. If you want something else, there's also Sport Drink. That link is in the description. You can use promo code TPC for 10% off or promo code Tommy's Podcast, as well as Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food. And if you can't do any of that, I would ask that you go to ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children. It's a group of special forces guys from 1993 till now, and they rescue about 10 or 11 kids every single year who are sex trafficked. They physically go and rescue them. So if you have to support one thing, I'd ask that you please support them. They are literally saving the lives of children. Um, Thank you so much. We are recording on Sunday, March 22nd, 2026 at 9 a.m. on the nose. Interesting. I say interesting because I just say it every day. Excuse me. I've been burping a lot this morning. Very professional start. I never burp. So, yeah, so you and I got in touch through a mutual friend, Nick Pritruzello, and
Yes.
we kind of phone tag back and forth, scheduled, rescheduled, and we had some, beautiful talks off air, and but yeah, no, we're finally putting it together, and yeah, you just showed me that thing, the Global Engagement Center, and which was for people that don't know, it's the Pentagon's. They have that, and they have another one. I think it's SRA, Signature Reduction Army. It's essentially you have your shit bots that are like your penny on your Happy Meal bots, where it's like this guy's a Nazi. It's like, yeah, okay. And then you have much better ones where you have actual people going in there and arguing points online because narrative wars are important, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, the first thing I looked at when you sent me that link was Global Engagement Center. And I'm like, oh, yeah. I mean, and, so many of my guests have kind of said, like, if you Google my name, you're going to find some things. I'm like, bro, all of my guests, like, that means you're in the TPC club. Like, hey, I was labeled a terrorist. I'm like, welcome to the show. So,
Right.
Joaquin, introduce yourself for everybody.
So my name is Joaquin Flores. I'm an open source political technologist, analyst, geopolitical analyst by way of education, social insurrection type stuff, counterinsurgency by way of work in the United States, SEIU, which is the organization that was behind our revolution, and Antifa BLM. So I come out of this before they did the 2020 stuff. This was like eight years before is when I parted ways with them, but I was with them since like 2005, 2006. And
U.S. government.
no, we're talking about the SEIU was the labor union that is the core organization that this array of NGOs that were funded by Act Blue or Democracy Action that came through this like Soros Democrat Party fundraising complex towards Bernie Sanders and our revolution.
I remember all that on Reddit. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like the color revolution, so called, like in the United States. And I had worked with people that were deeply involved like that. When I saw their names pop up, I was like, man, that's crazy to see where they are in their lives now. Like people like Rafael Navar, which is I'm not saying I'm not asserting any particular role, but that's just the person that came up and looking at some of this stuff, and I was like, wow, I remember my work with Rafael back in the day. So it's and then I moved to Belgrade. I've been advising political parties in power and in government coalitions about their counterinsurgency, countercolor methods, and consulting and writing a lot for a Russian Academy of Sciences backed publication called SCF. I won't name it like out because it could lead to strikes and shit like that. And it's banned on all Western platforms. Like you can't share the link for it anywhere. And like the United States government, like our government from the Biden regime and the Obama regime, contend that it's a project of Russia's foreign intelligence service. And but more realistically, it works close to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in some capacity, but it's a project of the Russian Academy of Sciences. They don't mention that part because it's just, but it would legitimize it too much. So I'm a researcher, writer in that respect. I communicate directly to the public as well, and a lot of the things I do, I just telegraph it to the public, and I know that it's being listened to. A lot of the things, many of the themes that I touch upon and the angles that I take are listened and later reproduced through like Tucker Carlson, Sagar and Jetty, and The Rising, and the new show that they do with Crystal Ball, Jimmy Dore. So like a lot of my content, a lot of my ideas and insights are, what's the word? Appropriated without compensation, whatever. And that's like an ecosystem that's been going on at least for 6 or 7 years. And I didn't believe it at first, but people over the years, like many numerous listeners and readers over the years, keep pointing it out in the timeline, like when I would write or say something, and then when those folks would do it. So, Mike Benz, former Trump administration State Department guy, was exposing how this Media Matters stuff works. And Media Matters, Tommy, Mike Benz explicitly characterized the role that I'm in. I'm allowed to exist. I'm allowed to write and think and reach like a small segment of the public, just so that my ideas keep coming out so that they can be farmed. But there's also like hard limits on exposure. I've been deplatformed, debanked, a lot of shit over the years that it's if it wasn't for a commitment to outcomes, my countrymen, Americans, people in the world as well. I live in Serbia. If it wasn't for my commitment to what I think is right and subordinate to God, then I wouldn't be doing it. It's far easier just to be an analyst for a three-letter agency. It's far easier just to do a lot of these things that, look, whatever people do for their reasons. I think it's easier because I've been through shit. And I can't imagine it being more difficult to be actually backed by a government or an intelligence organization and be an analyst, So being an open source guy for the public, it comes with a lot of like trials and tribulations. It comes with a lot of danger and hazard, jeopardy, but I think it's much more spiritually rewarding. Yeah, that's my intro.
No, it was awesome. It's always the appropriation. Yeah, that'll you'll never get the credit you want on anything, and it's
hmm
and like I did a huge show, the biggest show I ever did. I think it was January 2022. It was right after Dr. Malone went on Joe Rogan. They talked about mass formation psychosis, and I got on the guy who made the theory, Matthias Desmond. I got him on with Dr. Malone. This is back. I was banned from YouTube. I was on Rumble. I had less than 1,000 subscribers, and it still has the most views of anything I've ever done. And it got like 1.5 million views, which is like the coolest thing ever. It was cropped everything, and it was all over like Tim Pool, YouTube, and in my mind, I'm like, just I'm not even a guy that's like, you owe me copyright. I'm like, just point him to my show.
Right. Just like
I,
link
I had a
me.
guy I hadn't talked to since middle school. His name also Tommy, and he was like, "Bro, I saw you on the news," and I was like, "Dude, yeah, what?" And it's like cropped. And I'm like, "It's like just crop. You can see them talking. You like just crop. You can see like the side of my shoulder." And I'm like, and then people are like, "Well, that's the best form of flattery." And I'm like,
That's right.
"Yeah, sure. Objectively, it is." When you're trying to build a company, though, you're like, "Hey, man, my landlord doesn't take flattery.
That's right.
She
He
takes
doesn't
U.S.
accept
dollars."
batteries.
I get the flattery. I totally. And for truly selfless stuff, I interview a lot of these guys that ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children, the Special Forces guys. They go and rescue sex trafficked kids, like
Yes.
physically rescue. It's none of like the we sell T-shirts. It's they
Right.
physically
Right.
go hardcore. fucking night vision silencers and go get them. And they've been doing it for 30 plus years. I have them on all the time. Those get shared without credit. I don't care at all. Send it. If anything, crop me out. I'm probably bad for the message. Like, but
Right. I know what you mean.
in terms of like not getting, yeah, you'll never get that's just, it is what it is. But yeah, so when you were saying, and this is just I said somebody that has no, because so people always say like, how do you, Tom, like, how do you not know? How do you know or not know if you're like platforming someone who's an asset? I don't. How would I?
Right.
Even if I was well versed in this, which I'm not, but I have a biology degree. How would I know? I probably have carried water for narratives. I don't know. But
Yeah,
in
how can we
general,
know? Right.
yeah. Well, over 2,000 episodes, I've kind of distilled it down to, I believe it's the biblical quote, but like you'll know them by their fruits.
Yes.
And it's very simply like I had that guy on over the years, and what happened? You know what? A lot of he ruined a lot of relationships. You're like, oh, and he was all smiles. You're like, that guy fucked me. And then other people, you're like, that guy's kind of stuck up. He's kind of an asshole. But over the years, it opened a lot of doors to other, military guys who are also stuck up assholes. But he gave me the nod, and it's like, oh, that guy came across as a cunt, but like, it helped me. And so
Hmm.
that's what I've learned through this is you'll know them by their fruits, and that's
Yes.
about it. My point in saying that is so when you're working for governments in the counter intel, counter color revolution, how do you know? Not that I don't even know if you could, but it's like I look at it and it's like, yeah, we need a counter to the whole, like the BLM protest. None of that shit was organic. Like Antifa, they're showing up, coordinate. I have guys on all the time, like logisticians from like the military. They're like,
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
an
yeah.
operation, bro. This
Right,
isn't
right.
here in Portland, Maine. I see rallies every once in a while. Those are the ones you expect from 20-year-olds. They're all drunk.
Yes.
There's nine of them, whatever. When they all
Right.
show up coordinated, same time, but so I would say something in the US like we do need a counter to that. But my next thought is, okay, at what point does that counter to a color revolution? At what point does that become like an FBI COINTELPRO, where now it's a counter to anything? And maybe the government does deserve a color revolution or a protest. But so for you, and that's what I'm asking you relating to as like the podcast host, how can you know you are actually helping a government shut down a foreign, unorganic, astroturfed movement, or are you unwittingly helping them shut down a genuine movement? And not that you, and I would imagine your answer somewhere is probably like you will know them by their fruits. And it's so none of that. I don't say any of that like I putting you on the spot or casting a stone.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
talking
it's
to
okay.
somebody that
Great
has no,
question.
no idea what the,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I would say first of all that all of my work has been below the standard requirement for a person to actually file as a um, as a as a foreign asset or a foreign consultant registration. But definitely, we're talking about the political parties and their coalition parties in power, and the extent to this has to do with the mappable network of NGOs. That this is not a conspiracy. It's not secret, Tommy. Like these organizations are registered to operate with budgets like in the country, and they're often a subsidiary of one that exists in Germany, in the UK or the US. The dollars come through Soros or Soros-like organizations on the private philanthropic end. That's all a matter of very basic forensic accounting. So it's pretty much like non-controversial. And then, of course, you have USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy. And then you have myriad cornucopia of interlocking directorate of private co-public where a single organization will have funding both from private philanthropy and, let's say, the NGO industrial complex through governmental funding like USAID or NED. And then that group will have 5 or 10 different NGOs that they donate to. And then each of those 5 or 10 will have 5 or 10 that then donate to a couple in a given country. So it actually operates almost the same way as Wall Street, where because none of if it's over 5% ownership of a given publicly traded company, then it's like a matter of public information. But if one family or a group of individuals owns is a 5% or less owner of like 100 or 1,000 different companies, and each of those are invested into those. So it's a matter of forensic and actually helping decision makers understand that part of it is the easy part. Like they typically know. Now, in terms of the genuineness of the protest, that's where it gets very tricky because a lot of the issues that protesters are protesting about in these organized fronts are legitimate issues. So, and this is why it's important how governments respond. And a lot of my work has been about breaking the model of police versus protester dialectic because all of those work out in favor of the protesters. Like this is a pre-understood script that has come out of an organization called the Albert Einstein Institute. No connection to Albert Einstein. They just named it that way.
I just
And
learned
this is
that the other week from Colonel Watkins. Yeah.
yeah, and that was developed by people like Gene Sharp and his Serbian protege Srđan Popović, who created Canvas out of the Otpor model. The Otpor model was used as the destabilization protest movement in Serbia right after it was like Yugoslavia, or still technically Yugoslavia, but it was in the Serbian Republic when Milosevic was in power. So this is like 27 years ago. And which is not to say there were not legitimate criticisms of Milosevic or that there was not real problems or that the protesters had nothing to say. You see, so that's where it gets complicated. And the typical model of bringing in police to put down a protest, and you're going to get those photo ops of like protesters putting flowers into the barrels of guns and shit, is like what you need to avoid. And a lot of the things that I've developed are building counter protest movements or mobilizing like a national popular mass against a liberal mass, or even better, like organizing within the protest movement so that the demands of the protest movement are demands that are realistic and can be addressed by government or civil society. Because if and what we've seen in response to that, Tommy, in the evolution of these psychological operations is that now the protest organizers are trying to mobilize on themes that are disconnected from tangible reality, like things that you can't fix because they're in people's minds. So like one of the big things happening in Serbia, because we're having an ongoing color revolution attempt, which is not to say that the present government is without not like a lot of problems, right? It's just like, are you going to go from the frying pan into the fire or whatever? Are you going to go from a stable society that has endemic corruption to a failed state that's going to be the flashpoint for World War III as they get invaded on three sides? So there's like, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And
The great Thomas Sowell.
that's right. And what we do is we look at what is going to cause the least injury to civil society and the sovereignty of the state. And how much can you meet the protest demands halfway or try to defuse some of the radicalism or separate the radicalism from the mass of the protests, which are more realistic people that just want some reforms in that society. Often those reforms are decent or need to be done. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they can't be done and they need to be done. So there's a lot of, it's a multivariate question.
Um, he's I like never burp. I'm burping nonstop. I don't whatever. But yeah. So I mean, I think one of the kind of the basic ideas is like, well, how do you break up a peaceful protest? And it's like stay peaceful. It's very obvious. Agent provocateurs, right? You go undercover, you throw a brick through a window, and now it's a problem, right? And that doesn't mean that all protests are innocent, but it's I would imagine tactically pretty easy to be like, yeah, just go get some undercover guy to go, throw a crowbar at a woman, and all of a sudden you go, hey, we got to shut it down. It's violent. I would imagine the opposite's also true
That's right.
because you're saying a lot of these issues are legitimate issues. And
Yes.
yeah, man, that's the mask I would put on if I was doing a color revolution or setting up a protest I wouldn't be stupid about it and just be like, I demand you kill the president. Like that's pretty obvious, and you're gonna have the military respond to you. I would do something that could very well be a legitimate thing. Insurance copay, border crossing, appropriation to public schools that don't teach creation, whatever. I
Yes.
would take that and use that, and a lot of it would be organic, and people would be completely unwitting too. It's like the CIA guys always tell me the best asset is someone that doesn't know they're an asset, and sometimes I think they're saying that to me, like, but like, that's what I would do. Is you would wrap it up. It's the opposite of the agent provocateur. If they threw a brick, you shut it down. You'd be like, well, what are they marching about? Well, they're marching about, abortion, or they're marching about, legalization of marijuana. And most people would be like, I mean, that's a fair thing. But the actual driving motive force behind it, who's giving the money, that's a foreign power that's going, we're gonna push this, and then we're gonna, whatever, put it this way. And then you realize, oh, that was a weapon. That wasn't a, it's the ice cream truck going, or it's like yeah, it's like something, sometimes in the Secret Service motorcade, like not anywhere near the motorcade would just be like a random, U-Haul truck. And it's like, yeah, that is Delta Force in it. Like, you
Hmm.
don't know until it's happening. So is that a legitimate thing we have to look at? And you're like, is this a real organic thing for higher wages,
Right.
or does this have the glove in it of China or America or Russia or whatever?
Well, I could, for example, like the recent protests in Serbia, the funding of it, like forensically, was really easy to identify, but at the same time, there were real issues. And like my wife, for example, is a professor of law, and the professors joined the student strike, and she joined the strike. But then when the government said, okay, we're giving the professors a raise, that also eliminates their legal right to strike. So when the union accepted it, so the union accepted it, and then that was it. But she knew all along, like it's not like she's not my wife and we don't talk, right? So she knew all along this was like a color situation, but it was also there had not been a wage increase ever since the pandemic era inflation when we're not in the EU, but obviously we're surrounded by the EU, and so all the local economies and costs and everything affect us directly. And the European Union, during COVID, during the lockdowns, to keep the economy going, they printed like 800 or 900 billion dollars. So it was very close to the American bailout, it was like a trillion something. And although talking about that can distract from the quantitative unlimited that's been going on in the U.S. forever, but nevertheless, that was unique for the European Union, and it created pretty much like 40 to 50% inflation overnight. Like people can deny it and they can say it was like 12% or 15% or 10. Like all you have to do is look at gasoline prices, look at the prices of groceries, look at the prices of rent, and it was like almost double in many cases. So on average, I'd say it was 40, 50% inflation. That's crazy overnight. And people had not received any raises. Now, in the private sector, it was easier for people to get raises. A lot of people are self-employed. They have their own small business. There's a lot of electricians, plumbers, mechanics. They're just going to raise their costs. That's a no-brainer. A lot of people that are employees, a lot of companies couldn't keep people at the pre-pandemic wages. So that was a no-brainer too. Public sector is like the government decides what your salary is. So the public sector joined these so-called student protests that were part of this color technique being used in the country. But as soon as the government can address something like salaries and wages. So they did. And then that pulled the public sector out of support for these protests. And the protests have been pretty much doomed since then. And then in the United States, Trump cut off the funding for these protests when they shut off when they cut the pipeline, they closed the faucet on these NED USAID pipelines. And then those parties sued Trump, or the government sued the administration to ease those back on. And so within 6 or 8 months, whatever it was, they've been able to get some of the funding turned back on. And the protests here, you can like track the funding just issues like with the volume of the protests. It's like a direct relationship. It's pretty amazing. But they have definitely faded out of significance in recent months, and I don't think it was the winter. It's already been fairly like nicer weather here already, and we haven't had major events. And one of the main things that I advise on, and that I also speak to the public about, is in color revolution. I had no idea we were going to talk about color revolutions, right? But like we can talk about whatever too. But in terms of the how they're designed to work in the post-communist sphere, is ideally you need to make an alliance of the nationalists and the liberals. Like you need to have like the so-called right-wing nationalists in alliance with the liberals. And that's going to work in a lot of Eastern Europe where the nationalism is anti-Russian, because that works within the whole, I guess you could say the whole background. First of all, maybe as like a context, is that color revolutions in the Balkans and Eastern Europe are the power struggle between transatlanticism and so-called Eurasianism or Russian power, right? So that's like the context of it. So if the government is like not anti-Russian enough, then there's that color revolution aspect. However, in my work in Macedonia, it was different. That was a very strange case, and it was a lot of I had a lot of frustration in my work consulting political parties related to government in Macedonia, because they were already committed to the EU path, but they wanted to be, an ethnically Slavic state called Macedonia. They weren't getting recognition. Like Greece was blocking their recognition because they called themselves Macedonia. There are several regions in Greece called Macedonia, just south of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. So that was like a no-go. And, every EU country has a veto power on the process of a new EU member state coming in. That's what you're, learning about with Ukraine and Hungary and Slovakia and other countries saying no, and Poland and others saying no, there's no way Ukraine's going to be part of the EU. So likewise, the problem in Macedonia, for what it's worth, is that this was not a contest over transatlanticism versus Russia. This was actually about a British project called Greater Albania, and a German project for Macedonia to be part of the EU, but to be part of the EU on the basis of it being an ethnically Macedonian state, whatever that means. But Greater Albanianism has been about taking down the border between Macedonia and Albania, such that from the Ohrid agreements onward, Macedonia already lost control of the border patrol officers on the Albania-Macedonia border. So basically, Albanians control both sides of that, and they have no idea what the real population of Albanians is in Macedonia. So let me just give what I want to say. Albanians, beautiful people, wonderful people, deep culture, excellent, honest people that you can, live, love, and work with, no problem. We're talking about grand strategy, geopolitics, and how people get manipulated against each other. So, yes.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's well, yeah. I always try to, remind myself, when I say something like Israel or Ukraine, I'm like, it's not in the same way. If somebody blamed me for like, the quagmire that was the Iraq War, I'd be like, do you think I have any say over this shit? Like,
Right.
what are you talking about? I
Yes,
get,
exactly.
I do this every episode. I have to go use the restroom. You're more than
Okay,
welcome to
cool.
you can take the show and tell everybody
Okay,
where to
cool.
find you.
Yeah,
You want that?
right.
All right, all yours.
All right, cool. Yeah. So when with Macedonia, it was you had a conflict really between the EU and the UK, and this is all happening in the context of Brexit also. So there's this other dimension of tension or issues between the UK and the EU, but but economically, in terms of European Union finance, when it comes to crisis or when it comes to uh, broader fungibility. You don't have to look much farther than City of London banking to see how reliant or dependent the EU is on the UK or the City of London, if you will, to be precise. So it may be of interest to people, but all of the structure of the loans that the EU is trying to build right now for their funding for Ukraine. Right now it's 90 billion, but they've kind of cut that back from the original proposal, which was 140 billion. This is first of all in violation of the EU treaty. The EU is not a country; it's an economic union, so everything is treaty. And there's a certain article, Article 120, 122 of TFEU, which outlines this process, and they're totally just trying to railroad it, and they're creating a treaty crisis between EU states to do so. So, what that underscores is that while there's a political tension and conflict that's evident to people between the Franco-German dominated EU and the UK, the role of the UK in the EU has been, you know, complex and multivariate. And I don't want to simplify things, but you could say, in short form, like heuristically, you could say it has been to control it. So the stuff going on now with the funding and basically the people that wrote the loan structure that is in the legislation that the European Commission is trying to force onto the EU as a mutualized debt obligation, this $90 billion. The structure of that legislation was of the loan part of it. It's basically to issue bonds, and the City of London banks have already agreed to buy those bonds, and that's where the money's going to come from. Like issuing bonds doesn't generate money. Like you have to have buyers for the bonds, and like issuing bonds is just issuing treasury bonds. So first of all, what is the EU Treasury? Like that makes no sense anyway. But they've created that, and the City of London banks, which are also can be like U.S. branches in the City of London, like J.P. Morgan, what was it formerly Chase, Citibank, and so forth, Citigroup, and but you're also going to have, of course, like HSBC and others. So they are the ones that created the structure for this loan because they're the ones that have to say, yeah, we're going to agree to buy these bonds. So they've actually created the legislation. So that shows the economic relationship between the UK or City of London and the Franco-German European Union. And that conflict, even this was 10 years ago in my work in Macedonia, that conflict between those two powers was evident in the outcomes in the power struggle for the future of Macedonia. So that's just like these little microcosmic examples show you that they show you the map of a larger geopolitical conflict microcosmically.
Some people absolutely freeze up when I leave, and some people are champions. You rose to the occasion. And then, I probably shouldn't do it to guess anyway, but whatever. Um, do you ever have the feeling or the urge to, or the need to resist, or whatever, when you're just looking at it and it's just fractals and fractals and fractals and movements of, I would imagine it's hard not to, I don't want to say check out, but maybe check. Like all the time I get, early on in the show where I'd have on this guest and that guest, and then they'd say something ill about someone else, and I'd be like, yo, okay, I shouldn't talk to them. But then I talk to this group of people, and I'd get to them, like, these are all genuine guys, and as it goes on and on and on, even people with the same message, same beliefs, there's all this just tribalism and infighting, which is going on since the dawn of time. But I probably in like a year or so, I stopped actually trying to like map out who was on which side. And it was just very much so my blanket response is always this. I'm going to interview anyone I want, and the only rules are you can't cite violence, you can't go say blow up the senator's house. But they also is you can't talk negatively about a guest that's not here to defend themselves. And because of that, I interview people who they'll hate. Like, I can't believe you have that person on. I'm like, well, they don't like you either, but I have them on, and I have you on, and guess what? I don't let them talk about you. And most people are like, I don't know if they like it, but they at least go, whatever, fair enough. And if they say like, well, I won't come back on your show, I'm like, Well, I'd love to have you on again sometime, but I try to. But for me, the very quickly the calculator dividing by zero. I was like, hold on. I know who
Right.
I am. I'm gonna interview them. I'm not gonna let them talk smack about someone else. And then other than that, like that's my border. That's my castle wall. I'm not gonna try to run the whole world. I have my castle on a hill and I can how is it for you to do you have that feeling when you're just looking at it and you're just overwhelmed by it where you're like, what, like like a physician specializing in one thing. Like you
Right.
can't, it's medicine's so advanced now. It's like
Yes.
you can't be a cardiologist and also like, I don't know, do, breakthrough research on, bone cancer.
Right.
It's just too much. And it's not a flaw. It's just like
Sure.
there's a limitation to my, my CPU power in my head.
That's right.
Do you get that? What is all like what all is this shit?
Yeah,
Or
it reminds me
yeah.
of that meme, the meme or whatever, the old cartoon of the elephant and it's a bunch of people with
Yeah, yeah.
blindfolds touching
It's a
different parts of it.
snake. It's a tree. It's a
Right.
yeah.
It's like, so, I have a awareness of my own subjectivity. And like, even when people talk about, well, this is a fact or something, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like, the only facts, like, there's two definitions for this word called fact, right? There's one definition, which is a historical or legal definition of fact, like these are the admitted facts of the case, or this is what history, consensus history views as the fact of some no longer present phenomenon, or that there's some agreement or some consensus that some phenomenon in the past had occurred. So in other words, you're talking about agreement about a past condition or past occurrence, and that's very different from empirical facts. Like, in other words, like what's right in front of us. Like, there's a red ball, there's a tree with green leaves. We're both looking at it. We're both in the same place. That's the only real fact in that literal sense that one can speak of. So everything short of that, dude, is subjectivity, right? So, and then, there's problems I encounter. Like, I'm a generalist, but I work with a lot of specialists, and working with specialists that have awareness of the limitations or that I can defer to their specialization, right? And without it being like an issue of thinking that their specialization limits them from understanding their field. But the bigger problem is specialization in one area being used to maybe cast aspersions on the likelihood or probabilities of certain truth claims or certain analytical claims made in another field. So, in other words, a person who's like an expert architect might be great at architecture or something like that, and they might have a big social media presence, but that doesn't mean that they have the background or the education or the experience or the life work to weigh in on what they think is going on in, let's say, with Trump's strategy on X, Y, or Z. You see what I mean? And so, but everyone can, let's see, it's difficult because people can be, in Germany they call it a Fachidiot, and Fachidiotism is this condition of being like over specialized in a certain area that actually makes you blind to other areas. So I'm a big supporter or fan of syncretic or interdisciplinary studies, and people that have enough awareness of adjacent or even unrelated fields that they're always looking to integrate or always looking to consult people that have that specialization and then integrate those views, or to understand the limitations and strengths and then incorporate that into their own worldview. So in terms of like being overloaded, I think one of the, and I don't know this is intentional, even in its genesis, but people had awareness of it then, so very well could be. But like information overload or information saturation. We're living in a time of, it seems like, acceleration of events, and the amount of data and information that you need to be able to have clarity even on one event is related to your ability to have a sense of what's happening in a bunch of other things. But it's like we're in this quickening. And I know me and my friends and colleagues, we talk about all the time how, 15, 20 years ago, there was like one event in a year, and now there's like one event every week. I mean, it's maybe two major events are occurring every week, this is so what are we like 50 times more? It's exponentially quickening, and it's moving beyond even collaborating groups of individuals like a think tank is moving beyond the ability for even larger, well-organized think tanks to wrap their wrap their arms around what's going on. So I'm very skeptical about large truth claims as a consequence, and I think that awareness in itself is going to be part of the self course correcting process. But one of the things that jumps out at me a lot, like when I'm trying to evaluate, you know, what I'm saying or what someone else is saying, is how does that map to outcomes? Or as you were said earlier, that you'll know it by the fruit that it bears. There are a million and one, maybe close to infinite number of ways of articulating how the world functions or how a particular phenomenon is unfolding. But I think there's two ways that you can reality check that. So the main claim is going to be about explanatory power of events or scenarios, dynamics or history, explanatory power. But the way to check that, I think, is with predictive power. And I make a lot of forecasts about events that are likely to transpire or the themes or the underlying conflicts that will be established, or like receipts will come in based upon those. So I don't have like a PR agent to like say for me like how well these are, but other people tracking these, I'm batting somewhere between 600 and 800. Sometimes I'm batting 900 or 1,000, but I'd say 700 I'm batting overall. And these are complex things. These are not 50-50 events, because that would put you at 500 even if you were flipping a coin. These are multivariate complex things where you can strike out. You can easily strike out all the time. And So I think that the reason that there has been a fair amount of, again, and it can come with hazard, but a fair amount of trust in what I'm talking about today about probable future events or future dynamics being exposed as such, is that the explanations I give about the background and the history leading up to it, is has successfully enabled me to forecast events that then occur. So that then becomes, a historical fact, so to speak.
I kind of find it, I think it's actually optimistic that it's accelerating so much. I also think it's not unrelated to the technological singularity.
Hmm.
It's you can view a star in like different, wavelengths. You're like, here it is in thermal, here it is in X-ray, here it is in IR, and it's like they all look pretty similar. You're just looking at different parts of it. That's where my mind always goes, where I'm like acceleration of like technology, phones are better, video games are more realistic, video chat, blah, 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 Uber Eats and drones and Starlink. And it's like
Right.
that's like you just see a spiral, and then it's like, and then overlay like happenings. And it's like, all right, we'll go back 50 years. Well, the technology is moving slower and the
Yes.
happenings are moving. Causation isn't correlation. But man, I kind of look at it and I go, there, and I don't think it's just as simple as we all phone, so now we're all aware of the happenings. I think that's part of it. Whatever the happenings are, the analogy I always use is it kind of feels like the vapor shock wave cone coming off of a
Hmm.
fighter jet. It's the fighter jet's the technology. The happening is this boom, and the optimism in me tells me like it's just if it's harder to control, I think ultimately that's good, and it could be horrible. But
Right.
at the broad, because we're talking about the microcosms and the macros and the micros and at the broadest sense and in the broadest view of world history, control is good for stability, shipping lanes, what global travel.
Hmm.
monopoly on control is almost always horrible. It
Right.
almost always results in everybody dead.
Right.
Like it almost
Yes.
always ends up. It's like we keep doing this one thing. It somehow just always ends up with just trenches full of bodies. Like, well, then
Yeah.
let's get away from that one. But so I don't know. I kind of find some optimism and hope in
Big time. Me too.
that it's they can't. I'm sure the military has some crazy AI that Chat GPT 90, but even then, it's like it's probably harder and harder to pin down. And it's well, no, we have the internet, and it's like well, everyone else has the internet now too. So
Right.
it's this thing where it's you discovered steroids, but now everyone else in the NFL found it too. And
Right.
so it's this
Exactly.
cat and mouse where there will always be an attempt, and there always will be, I believe, moderate success at a control mechanism, government down to whatever tribal warlord. But that's how I view it. I'm like, I don't think anyone can. I think I think they like to appear that they have
Right.
control. Gorbachev, our power comes from our perception of power. I don't know if that's actually a Gorbachev quote, but he said it on Chernobyl, the HBO thing. But I don't know. I find some optimism in that. Like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
gonna, they're watching it all. I'm like, I think they're trying.
They're trying.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I mean, of course, you have the there's a debate, of course, to whatever extent like the large language module phenomenon is an investment bubble or if it's actually going to pay off in that sense. And of course, the trend to talk to everyone's going to talk their book about AI and people want to defend their investments and all these companies are publicly traded or their projects of publicly traded companies. So they need the propensity and the incentive to over invest or over what I want to say is trump up the effectiveness or to say that the limitations of these things are not in the near future. There's too much financial incentive to oversell large language modules and their ability to give accurate feedback and summaries of very large volumes. We're talking about very large, very large data analytics and in real time and simultaneously and dynamic. So you're really talking about the ballistics or calculus of events that are influenced by you know some figure, some astronomical figure that would approach something like the probabilistics of the universe coming into creation on its own or something like that, like 10 raised to the 65th power or some shit. Like it's when you think about it in terms of even from Bayesian statistical modeling, and you know there's been so many different trends and that influence stock markets and investment by because a lot of people that have gold fever or are large portfolio managers or are doing trading, just day trading, may not. That's their focus is like algorithms and things like that, and they can be super smart and like have whatever, but it's the once you're investing in something, there's human beings want to believe that in that, and then or if you're selling those stocks, you're going to oversell them. So kind of like from the outside looking in, I think that there's definitely, this is not artificial intelligence. This is definitely not artificial intelligence. This is not anywhere that's going. This is not even a model that's capable of breaching into the arena of sentience. We're just talking about large language modules, and it requires a human being to interact with it. And the degree that it hallucinates, the degree that it averages out information, there's so many problems, and the returns on that. I mean, I just saw Altman trying to justify their losses, and he was saying that that was commensurate with growth and stuff, which is like historically true in a Keynesian sense, but like it's just right. So I'm optimistic with you. I think that the complexity of events. What I say is that evil is like a full-time job. Like evil is like hard, right? Evil is like a lot of manipulation and work to get something over, get something more. Honest, good people are just going about their lives, trying to provide for their kids and love the people around them. So the volume of information and the degree to which it's very difficult to approach. Your analogy of the fighter jet and the boom, I think, is super appropriate because when the technology that's you talk about, it's not just the information that we have access to through our phones, right? But when investors and other power movers are making decisions and then they're flooded with complex data or multivariate data, and then it points a certain direction, it's like in journalism getting the scoop. It's like, getting the first trade, getting the first in on something. And so then they're making moves. That is also contributing to the cycle of quickening, of exponential quickening of actions, is people not trying to lose on opportunities, arbitrage loss. There's the degree to which that this is happening is historically never before seen. So it could lead very easily to broadening of conflicts and wars. But in terms of monopoly on power, I would 100% agree that it works against monopoly on power. It works against monopoly on information and hence monopoly on power. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the two things I always think about is was it the closer you get to the speed of light, it requires exponentially more energy for exponentially less acceleration. So
Right.
it's simple analogy. Let's just say I know
It's
none
like
of
the
you.
law of diminishing returns.
I know this analogy makes zero sense, but let's say it takes 1 gallon of gas to get you to 100 miles an hour. And, it's like once you get up to higher and higher, then it takes a gallon of gas to get you five, and then it takes 10 gallons to get you 1 mile an hour, and then it takes you 1,000 to get point one. And I look
Right.
at that and I go, all right, speed of light, okay. I think that kind of applies to power. It's like
Hmm.
you can do it. It doesn't mean that you can't do any of it. Like you can exert some, and I will argue some control, or even I'd say maybe even more than some, more than half. Control is good. It's what can I control in my life? I stopped drinking 2 years and 2 months ago. Last year I lost down 50 pounds. I keep my apartment clean. I make an effort to call my mom every day. I listen to audiobooks. I go to the gym. I pray. I meditate. To the best I can. I don't rot my brain on social media. It's like that. Those are good levels of, in my opinion. I also have gone way too far in college where I would do all those things, but like I was fucking Mussolini. I tried to control everything, and then it ended up imprisoning me and became impossible and led to horrible OCD and I had like
You
clinical.
mean like your routine?
Oh
Your
yeah.
routine.
Well, I just tried to control everything around me. Everything. And it kind of worked. I had like 8 pack abs. I got into med school, but I was insane and I hated everything. I was constantly anxious, whatever. I think some control is like I don't when people are like anarchy, I'm like, no, I like that. Like yesterday, I went to the grocery store. I got some beef, I got some chicken, I got some riced cauliflower because I'm dieting because I'm a fat fuck, and I got some ketchup. And I went and I checked out, and there wasn't a gun checkpoint where they looked me up and down and shook me down, and some guys with AKs and gold teeth said I can go. Instead, I just took out a piece of plastic and swiped it and went beep, and I just walked out the door. I like that. I like some control. There seems to be a natural law though. It's like if you try to control all of it, I don't think you can. You can keep trying, you can keep pushing it, but like you're saying, evil requires a lot of control. It's one of the Winnie the Pooh quote. You, if you just tell the truth, you never need to remember anything.
That's it. Right. Right.
Well, what did I say to that guy? Well, I told this guy a lot about that. And it's really helped me with this podcast. I'm like, I can't deny things I've said because it's on fucking video audio.
Yeah.
like,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
with the time and Zoom, they put the day, the month, the year, the hour, the minute, the second. I'm like, I literally, there's no,
Yeah.
and it seems to be that there is that, and we can call it good or bad. I would say that's the hand of God. But let's say you're a complete atheist. It seems to be a natural law. It does kind
Hmm.
of seem to be a natural law. They will continue to try though.
Yes.
And could they do it with AI or what appears to be AI? Sure. But I mean, what's the counter to it now? I think somebody made a good point. They're like, yeah, man, you can never be proven. A picture of you can never be proven in a court of law now. You just go, ah, that was Claude. That was ChatGPT. You know, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, fuck. We're gonna
Right.
control it. It's much harder. It's we're gonna watch them all from orbit. It's like, yeah, but now the internet's also in orbit. So now like a government can't like snip the fiber optic lines. It just seems to be an eternal dance that will
Hmm.
go forever. And back to the AI, and I know nothing about this, but I'll speak about it because it's my podcast and I can say whatever I want because I'm, whatever, retarded. I don't think AI will become sentient. I don't really have any proof. I just don't. Um, to me, what's interesting and what's important is whether or not AGI and ASI is possible. The fact that people with a lot of money think it's possible, that that affects all of us, for good or bad.
Hmm. Right.
You don't have to believe that you'll get 72 virgins if you blow this thing up. If the
Right.
guy next to you does believe that and he has C4 strapped to his, it's no, it's your problem.
Right. Exactly.
That's my biggest like just I don't know, I guess observation of AI is whether or not it works. People with a lot of money think it works. So I guess the best thing to do is like, yeah, sell shovels during the gold rush. Who cares if there's gold? I don't know where I was going with that, but that's
Well, it's yeah. I mean, you see, recently Andrew Yang is talking about how law firms are laying off a bunch of people, or that they don't need interns. And I was thinking, like, well, first of all, a lot of law firms were using law clerks and lawyers in India, and like the Fiverr thing, basically, but with law in the first place, and that's probably more reliable than AI. Like there's been a big backlash in the legal profession where briefs and cases have been filed and they were generated by AI, and there's tons of errors like references to non-existent cases, like they hallucinate case law and everything. And so Yang was like way off about that, but he's got an interesting, like he was talking about the truck drivers are going to be out of work because basically like, well, I guess Musk's automatic driving thing is going to take over truck driving. And it's you can see that that could be on the horizon, and you do have self-driving cars, and then where are the liabilities when that truck drives into somebody or something like that? And so it's interesting that we have approached this in terms of you have both like something that's like driving, which is a very physical, dynamic interaction in the world, and then you have law, which is static. It's text analysis, and the role of AI in taking that out. And it's been slower than the people on the investor and stock end of things have suggested it would be, which is not to say that it won't happen to an extent, but certainly I mean, you're talking about the progeneration of AI over time. It would be like you're trying to artificially create a biological cell, and you're doing it, and that's like what you want to get at in the end. But all the things that you're making are little metal robots with circuits and stuff. Like that's not even the substance that's good. It's not a biological substance. Like the first real androids are going to be biological, look like in Blade Runner. You know what I mean? Like that's what it's going to be. It's not going to be metal. And AI is similar to that. These are language modules, and sentience is not even rooted in language, right? So like language, it grows out of sentience. So yeah, like a sentient being can create language, and a sentient being can create a language module, but a language module is not going to develop or be innovated towards sentience. So it's like the sum of all fears type of shit though. And like you're saying, the fact that people believe in it, and this could be a huge financial, this could be one of these bubbles like the dot-com bubble. This could be like the 90, was it 97 or 98 Asian market crisis bubble. This could be like any of the famous, this could be like the too big to fail shit with the, the so-called housing market crisis with the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac stuff in 2007. This like, it's been a while too. It's like time for a bubble, man. It's time. I guess we had the pandemic, which served like that purpose, but still, you know, with the stuff with the Strait of Hormuz and Iran and, the rising cost of energy and fuel, the attacks on data centers, like Zuckerberg just announced, Meta just announced that they're out of the metaverse. Metaverse is shut off. It's like, how is that not connected to Iranian strikes on
90 billion dollars invested.
like where? I think that's Hollywood accounting, dude. I don't I'm gonna almost like I don't have the background to assert it, but just like
Who
my
gives a shit? Who
intuition is
gives a
bullshit.
shit? Who gives a shit? We're called the Earth's flat. What do I care?
Right.
Or it's a military program that they're
Right.
laundering through a private contractor, which
Exactly.
is what they do and that's not even hidden.
Exactly. That's not
Uh,
even hidden.
when you look at compartmentalization, people have this idea. It's like, they're working on a plane and you don't know what part of the plane, you just working on the tires. That's what it was a while ago. But like all things, compartmentalization's evolved. I had on some guys yesterday talking about this. It's not that you're working on the wheel and you don't know if it's a fighter jet or a stealth jet. It's that you're working on a rubber composite
Right.
and you don't know if it's going to be part of a fighter jet or a stealth jet or the lining of a new recoilless rocket or
Yes.
part of the thing that unfolds the solar panels on a spy satellite for a country over. With the Manhattan Project, it wasn't that like people didn't know what the big picture was. A lot of people, they didn't know they were working even on it. So that's another level of
Right.
I'm working on the rubber composite. Maybe it's a plane. There was people that didn't know it was compartment. They thought it was just a job. Like the creation of the hydrogen bomb, which was after the Manhattan Project, was in the 50s. I forget the actual name for the program was. 10% of the nation's electricity was going to it. People had no idea they were even working on it.
Right.
But it was done through like GE and Ford, and they had all this shit. 90 billion, the Zuckerberg's just, it didn't work. I don't know.
Yeah,
That
it's
tells me
yeah,
that's 90 billion in data centers.
yeah, it's big question marks, and that's interesting because the first thing that you were talking about is you have no idea like who's an agent, who's an asset, if we're being operationalized, and by definition, like we all are. I mean, we're
And sorry, and didn't last year or the year before, didn't like 10 or 12 of these tech guys get these rather immediate and out of nowhere given ranks as like colonels or something?
yeah. What was up with that? That was very weird.
That's one of the things where 80 years later, when you're learning about the Manhattan Project, you go, oh, you can see how that's how I look at this, man. I'm like,
Yes.
yeah, we're doing what they're doing. How come Amazon's getting access to a nuclear reactor to build the military doesn't let anyone have access to a nuclear reactor but them?
Hmm.
Yes, but
Right.
them. So that's not Amazon.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. It's
Yeah,
like,
it's just that. I mean, the compartmentalization is very interesting. Like my cousin's husband, like on the face of it, out in Colorado, works for General Motors, but it's actually a research department of General Motors that does stuff for the military, and that's all that he knows. Like that's the extent to what he knows that his paychecks get cut for General Motors. He can tell his neighbors he works in research and design R&D for GM, but it's actually a military project embedded in but compartmentalized in General Motors. He doesn't even know, and he doesn't even know what he does or what it's for. And if he did, he couldn't say, but he doesn't, right? And because that's the nature of compartmentalization. But it's more broadly going back, like connecting your two things. Like everything we're doing is compartmentalized. Like we're doing this podcast. There's going to be information in that. Like that's going to be analyzed with people whose job it is to analyze these podcasts and to pull the information out, and then to write the scripts for the big branded social media influencers. Like that's a job. Part of it's going to be AI transcription. Then there's going to be a human that like reviews the summary of it, and then that's going to be. I mean, hypothetically, right? No accusations. That's going to be Tucker Carlson's script, or that's going to be Jimmy Dore's script, or whatever. So that's just how the ecosystem works. And in terms of assets, yeah, a lot of people, it's like it's not a it's obviously you have officers, who are signed up, getting paychecks, they know what they're doing. And then an agent, we think of an agent, but this is an agent doesn't, necessarily, have to be a member or on a paycheck or payroll or, have a clearance or, sign into work at a three-letter agency. But they have awareness that they're doing work for some agency or other, or at least they believe they have some awareness. It could be smoke and mirrors, but then, asset doesn't even have to know what the fuck, and in that sense, like everyone's an asset. I mean, in that sense, we're producing data, we're producing intel, we're producing opinions. Opinions are going to track. There's going to be analysis of opinions that are being put out, and then how does the public interact with or think about those things? There's going to be data generated around that, and then those are going to be executed. Those are going to be put out there through the mouths of these kind of selected other, in the media intelligence sphere, these other known projects. I mean, the stuff that Mike Benz has put out, and not that he's not part of this ecosystem, but the stuff that Mike Benz has put out about that, people should check out if they don't want to, if they want it to be something that's shareable or whatever with like infographics, like that other people can have awareness of this. He's explained a lot of complex things that people like yourself and others have been talking about for a few years in bite-sized infographics. The role of media matters, the role of a lot of these people in creating an ecosystem of information that amplifies certain people, that are controllable, but based upon the research, ideas, talking points, insights of a larger bouquet of other people that they simultaneously allow some reach so that they can like exist, but they also, will limit or, de-amplify, de-platform and so forth. So but we're all basically putting in work for this Borg fucking, thing. But I'm optimistic because it's, like you said, they're going to try. They're going to try, but other governments are doing similar or the same, and then there are limits to it, and the limits are more appreciable and faster approaching than those doing it would ever admit, because the nature of doing it also requires a level of delusion about the thing that you're doing. So, I mean, I know it's not a new trope that madmen are deluded.
No, no, but you at that you have to believe you are like the best. And there is some truth to that. Like I think if you were to sit down with like Tom Brady or, Mike Tyson or Michael Jordan, you'd get all the motivational stuff, but I think the longer you would hang out with them in private or something, you might start to tell them you like, yeah, but that's not true. You're not winning like five more Super Bowls. And I think they look at you the same way they'd look at you if you just said the sun's not rising tomorrow. They'd be like, all right.
Right.
I think that's that like final 1%. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and we're actually we went over an hour, which I'm surprised. So we'll wrap it up with kind of this is, excuse me, the what you said about the cell when you're recreating the cell. That's kind of how I look at the AGI thing. It's like if you just looked at a human body 500 years ago, you'd be like, if you want to recreate it without obviously procreating, yeah, you would make a thing with arms and legs and whatever. As you started to understand the organs, you'd be like, oh, we got to slap some organs in there. And as you keep going in, you'd be like, oh, and you got to put a brain in there. And you move in, oh, the brains have cells. And the more you go into the cellular biology and like the molecular level and the dendrites and the exons and the kinetic cores and tubules, and there's more and more stuff that you had no idea was in there. And the same way that if I wanted to recreate an iMac, I'd be like, well, it's a screen on a square.
Right.
That's not running iMovie. It's a screen on a square. Well, a gun is just this tube. Rudimentary, you could maybe get one shot out of it before it blows up. What you don't know about is the metallurgy and the alloys and the rifling. And
Hmm.
you go, oh, simply looking at it and trying to recreate it, you'll get something, but you're not going to get it. And that's how I kind of look at AI is like they could take our best understanding of the brain. I mean, I'm sure DARPA has one and recreate one, not digital, but you get software, AI data center, whatever, and they could do it. And it probably does some impressive stuff. But then in 20 years, when we discover, yeah, there's actually something that happens with neutrons at that level that was not put into the machine. So it's never going to. So I guess I look at it as like we're going to try to make it, but I don't think we're gonna make it because we don't know what it is from the ground up. And I guess
Hmm.
that's, and it's not that I'm pro or against AI. I don't give a
Sure.
shit. I look at it and some people say that's religious fundamentalism. You call it whatever you want. I just don't see how we're gonna recreate that when there are things we don't know about. How could
Yeah.
we know about it? It's you capture an F-22 or an F-35 and you could try to recreate it. If you don't know the exact alloys that they put in the cockpit so that it reflects light and so that radars don't show the pilot's head, or if you don't have the exact radar absorbing material at the exact density that they lay on the inner parts of it, you'll never know that that's what was needed. So like,
Right.
I don't know. Or you could perfectly recreate an alien could perfectly recreate a human down to the atom and it doesn't work. And it's like, well, you forgot the thing about how it belongs on a planet with a specific gravity. You made one in
Right.
orbit.
Right.
There's always something. It's just,
Yes.
I guess that's how I look at it is like, we'll try and we'll probably get somewhat close. I don't think we're going to make quote unquote it, if that makes any sense. So,
Yeah.
um,
I guess my concluding thought on our wrapping point there, like for my part would be I always keep in mind that there's a problem of we think we're getting closer to something, and then we discover another layer of complexity. And this idea of linear progress towards unlocking is also a myth. Like we can think that we're getting closer to it, like complexity of a cell or something like that. And then it's like, oh no, this single celled organism has 5 billion different operating parts, and each of those operating parts has like hundreds of genes that code for it. And we're never going to figure this out in 1,000 years.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were like, your parents passed their genes on down to you, but what your parents do in their life doesn't matter to you. And it's like, no, epigenetics,
Hmm.
you can fuck up your genes over time from smoking and drinking and, or even like, I think it was right around the 1900, maybe it was like 1905. There's a famous photo, and it's like the most brilliant physicists of the 20th century. It's just like a whole bleacher of, I think, Einstein, Bohr, Planck, they're all in there. And there was a quote from the meeting, and it was something along the lines of, you can look it up, its famous quote is, we've solved pretty much all the science of the universe. All we're doing now is fine honing the final measurements. And that was like 2 years after
Yeah.
the Wright Flyer. They got their dicks out going. We figured out everything. Look, check out our plane. And it's like that paper mache sack of shit that can carry 3 pounds and maybe fly a mile.
Right.
You got figured out?
Yeah.
Really?
Famous
You
words.
got
Yeah.
and and we can look back at them and laugh and be like, but now we're getting closer. And it's like, really? In 100 years, they're gonna be like, yeah, those retards thought they were at the end. They thought they had AGI, and that was it. Little did they know that, whatever, XYZ. So it just doesn't seem like it will end. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we'll wrap it up with that. I'd love to have you back on anytime, man. That was cool as
Be
shit.
honored.
I appreciate your time. And
Likewise.
yeah, that's how the show goes. Some people are always like, I'm sorry we went off topic. I'm like, this is the show. No, no, this is exactly what the show is. This is no, if it stays on topic, it's very I don't like it. Um, but if you could send me any of the links you have, or if you want to tell anybody, tell the people where to find you, and then also give them to me, and I'll put them in the description.
Yeah. On Telegram is really the best and only way. On Telegram at New Resistance. So just that little at symbol, New Resistance, Telegram. I'm XF, Joaquin Flores, easy to find. like Joaquin Phoenix or the San Joaquin Valley. Last name Flores. That's it, man.
Fair enough. Dude, appreciate your time. I'll send this to you when it's up. It'll be up a little later today. And look forward to the next one.
Yes, we'll do it.
All right, brother. Thank you so much for your time. Guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe, everybody.